Okay, so our next talk is by Agnieszka Pregowska from Poland, and she will talk about, on the International Women's Day, she will talk about the brain-inspired spiky neural network models. So go ahead, Agnieszka.
Hello to everyone. Today I want to present the paper by written by you and co-authors, which was published in the Neurocomputing and is entitled "A Brain-Inspired Neural Networks Model, Temporal Encoding and Learning." And in the few words, what is the aim of this paper? The author proposed the spiking neural network, which was partially consisting of the deeply integrated fire neural models for the pattern recognition. That is, in fact, the classification task, yes? And they proposed the application of the biological supervised synaptic learning rule to the decision-making process. There was the temporal learning rule in the spiking neural networks to obtain the efficient classification tool for various types of classification. In fact, they used the neural activity to the pattern classification for the discrete evaluated vector, and in the next step of the publication, they used this method to the continuous input variables, and that was the two-dimensional pictures which are converted into the sequence of 0 and 1s. In fact, this was binary patterns, and they used pictures of iris and this flower, and picture of letters and handwritten digits. First, I want to just briefly set how the neuron communicates from the biological point of view. Neuron communicate with other neurons and no neuronal cells, like, I don't know, muscles and blood, with use of the biological connections, which are called the chemical synapses. The synapses, in fact, are communication points in which one neuron, which is sending cell, we call the presynaptic neuron, and this neuron send the message, in fact, information, to the receiving neuron, which is called the postsynaptic neuron. These names are important when we want to talk about this type of the learning that is proposed in this paper. That's why this I want to just briefly go from biology. And in fact, this information, which one neuron communicates to other, is in the form of weak electric current, in particular employing the active potential, that is spikes. And spike is the transient change in the membrane voltage of the neuron, which is associated with the transmission of information. Here we can see, this is my plot, and maybe not very scientific, but the basic idea of this spike is shown on this plot, and the neuron communicates with these strong peaks, with which are done shutting down. Yes, and the stimulus for the creation of this action potential, this peak, is the electric potential on the environment of the cells. And this potential is wandering, we call the neural impulse. So in this theory, it is assumed that this sequence of active potentials, which are called spike trains, play the important role in information transmission, and the same the times of appearance of the spikes. Yes. And now we are going to the publication. Yes, and the authors consider two types of temporal learning. One type was the spike time independent plasticity, and in fact they only said about a few words about this. The heart of the paper is another type of learning, but this first type, the plasticity depends of the intervals between these presynaptic and postsynaptic spikes. And this basic of this plasticity can be found in the windows. There are two types of windows. One is long-term potential.
So,
And
Agnieszka, sorry, what are the pre and post synaptic spikes? Can they be seen on the previous plot or?
And previous, we can see here that presynaptic neuron, this is the spike that is sending the message, one neuron, and postsynaptic is the reaction for this spike.
I see. But in both cases, just some spikes of the
yes,
voltage. Right. Okay.
Like this.
Sure.
And in this paper, they don't said nothing about the theoretical description of the first type of temporal learning, but only this learning, I found the information that this type of learning is most commonly used bio-inspired learning in the networks. The heart of the paper is concentrated on the temporal learning, yes? And this synaptic plasticity of the neuron is governed by temporal connectivity of presynaptic spikes as postsynaptic spikes and also their supervised signal, yes? And the magnitude of these synaptic changes are fully determined by the time courses of postsynaptic voltage. So we have neuron, and the polarity of the membrane of this neuron is the same for all synapses in the neuron, and depends only of the desired responses. So the role of this supervisory signal, in fact, that is a signal that instructs our neuron about correctness of its decision. Yes, or of this neuron is making decision good or not, and is determined this global polarity. I will say later more detail.
So we're now talking about artificial construction, right?
No,
we're still in the biological.
Yes, this is the biological elements of this construction, of this equation, which will be the next slide. Yes.
Sure. Okay.
And this tempotron, this is neuron, can't make a decision under this supervisory signal by changing parameters. And here we can go to the moment. Okay, and here the authors propose the spiking neural networks, which are consist of three layers. First layer is the input layer, this encoding layer. Second layer is the learning layer. This layer is constructed of this tempotron. And here the authors applicate this linkly integrated fire neuron models, and we have output layer. They called it readout. And first is encoding model of neuron. Here, this neuron have M input connected to the part of stimuli and one out. And this neuron performs the mapping function that converts value string to the temporal spike. So the function converts the input points, we can say that, in the license with the encoding window. For example, if the stimuli is composed of binary variables, 0 and 1, this function of encoding converts this binary string to the temporal patterns of discrete spikes, because this model is discrete, yes? And
so you're saying that the information in the input is encoded in the temporal dependence of the spike. Is that the idea?
Yes, this is the idea, the basic idea. And I found that this idea was not from this paper, but from another paper.
And sorry to interrupt again. And so if you change the input, discrete sequence of 0 to 1, what it means is it will change the temporal signal, right?
Yeah.
I see.
And this, here. This idea of this tempotron comes from this paper from Gutik and Sponsky, which was published in the neurosciences. These authors only do take this theoretical equation and do some computational things with it. Yes. And this here we can see that there's two-layer tempotron, which is equivalent to this discrete version of tempotron, which is the learning algorithm in this network. So here the input time intervals are segmented into k disjoint slices, and each integer denotes the number of spikes that arrive of the afferent e during the given time segment. So the variable cl are the inputs into the perceptron in the next layer. Yes. So each of these perceptron in this layer has the same wave, the same wakes. This omega, yes, is the same for the all neurons, and with it computes the fields and the binary decision. And in fact, the output of this perceptron sums the Xi and computes the final decision by threshold. Yeah, and so when we have the pattern, classification of patterns, and pattern is classified as one, if in this case is at least one in the sequence.
So Agnieszka, I don't know where to be looking. So can you like point with your
okay, you can see
pointer? Yeah, because we see
okay.
pointers. Because otherwise,
okay.
I'm like going around the transparency. I don't know where to look.
Okay. Sorry, I didn't know that because I didn't know that you can see my moves. Oh, yes, super, yes. Perfect. Okay, so here we can. Here is the layer of learning, and all neurons in this layer have the same way, because. And this is what this thinks is what is different in other types of learning. I think that all the neurons are summarized with the same wave. Normalizing, we can choose other ways. Yes. And here, here's the final our final decision. Yes. Here is the input.
The data are flowing from up down. So how does the signal go from up down?
From up, they come from up. This is the spike. One spike, second, and another to n.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the same.
May I do one question real quick?
Okay, go ahead.
Other second.
Yeah, probably already went through this. Sorry about that. I maybe joined a little late. But so you have pretty much. Let's say windows of your spikes. That's why you have individual spikes here. So they have been identified and labeled. That's what you have.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you don't have a stream of the signal where you have to, from this stream, identify where the peak is, right? So you already have either a little window with spike or without the spike, right? That's the nature of your data.
Yes.
Well, that's a question I also have, because I think
that's the
your coming signal doesn't have dependence, right? It's just some collections of zeros or ones, and somehow you want to transfer it into the sequence of spikes or no spikes, something like that. So you want to go and
yes.
I'm a bit confused where that happens, or which function is responsible for them, or which
this function is I will probably.
Can you just point with your mouse?
In the here's only the maybe the just for the start, and this function is on the other slide. Yes, you can see this here. Maybe I should start.
So now you see that the voltage with time, and that dependence with time depends on wi's, which are weights, and then k.
As the k is the dynamic response of the neuron. That's called postsynaptic potential kernel.
Right. So exactly. So they like, fire or don't fire, and then
Yes.
you multiply it by weight, and then you get the total weight.
Oh.
But I thought there was something else there. Like even in the incoming signal, in order to get the temporal dependence, you have to somehow to convert your zeros and ones, whatever the.
Yes, I will talk about this later because I present the publication, yes, and they talk later when I will be talk about this continuous patterns. I will talk about. I can start here in the moment. Yes.
Mhm.
Maybe okay. We can switch this and we can here.
So
Yes.
I was saying something else. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead.
To the previous slide, the one you were talking about initially when I interrupted you, where you had the architecture, the Tempotron. Can you go
Temperature.
back to
Okay.
that one?
Mhm.
Yes.
Here.
Yeah.
This one. Yes.
So we have there the xi I k until xi n k, right? So
Yes.
this xi are model signals of the peak. Is that right? So are you modeling that? Is that like synthetic created or not?
You can create it synthetic. They do in the
Okay.
first step of the publication. They created the artificial, I can say, pattern for the recognition, and the second part of the publication was made that they convert the real pictures to the sequence of spikes.
Okay. So that's how we have the x as if that or not a peak, right?
Yes, in fact, there may be the sequence of spike is the sequence of 0 or ones, because these neurons work in such a way that the neuron fire when this V, I don't know in English, V or VT crosses the firing threshold, and after this potential is smoothly decreased to the V reset by shutting down all these spikes, yes. And this was the shape presented here.
I see.
Because the information, there are two theories. Yes, one theory said that the information is contained in the frequency of these peaks, only this values, and the other one tells us that all the information is also contained in the precise time of appearance of the spike.
Okay, Vladimir, some comment. Can you just articulate it?
Okay. Here, yes, and we finish here. Yes, now this is the.
So I'll just read what Vladimir wrote. He believes that the data encoding is time-based, so larger real value of input means that the neuron means that the spike will go faster than for the smaller real value. So it's the time of the spike that encodes larger values.
Yeah, sorry, I can expand on that.
Go ahead.
My internet connection was weird. Yeah, so usually like in spiking neurons, you either use Poisson encoding, which is kind of rate based. And then in this case, I think for the Tempotron in this paper, they're using basically the larger the real value you're encoding, the faster the neuron that's encoding it spikes. And that's the only like signal it produces is that one spike. So that timing, how fast it spikes from the start of the simulation is the encoding.
I see. So not the amplitude, but the time.
Yeah, you don't use amplitude. I don't think really ever.
Okay, but that's maybe a good question. Presumably, like within a signal, you can encode more than just spike.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. So in the brain, I think the assumption is, or at least the consensus is, that spikes are kind of the same level usually, so they don't really encode. The amplitude doesn't really encode anything. In fact, the liquid integrating fire neuron, it's a lot more an abstract model than like the amplitude peak that was in the other slide. So it's just an integrator that once it reaches a threshold, that's just considered, okay, we have a discrete spike. So there's really no like amplitude there to encode. Yeah.
But presumably you can, even if you don't have like maximum amplitude distinction, you can have like multiple spikes, right? And then that would have more information than just having
Yeah,
one.
yeah, that would go into like rate encoding approaches. But I think the Tempertron is more of a spike time rule.
I
So
see.
that's why they're using the spike time encoding here. Yeah.
I see. All right, good. Well, let's.
Theoretically, we can take another other model of neurons and have more data. Yes,
Sure.
because this lift model is quite simple neural model. Yes.
Yes.
And okay, here we have the numerical example. We have two patterns. One pattern is denoted by green dots and another with the blue dots. Here we can see this, this function v threshold. And when in the input is coming the pattern of green dots, the neuron don't fire because don't reach the cross the threshold, and in the case of the blue dots, the neuron is fired because it reached the threshold levels, and here it's shutting down. Now here we have the dynamic response of these neurons, this PSP postsynaptic potential kernel. That was this K function. Yeah. Sorry.
So the reason why the blue fired is because it had like two spikes there, one added on top of the other then, right? It looks like, no?
Yes.
Okay, so then there isn't just one spike and
one dot denoted one spike, yes. Every dot is a spike, yes. This
Oh, but I'm looking at the blue line. It looks like there is like one blue line spike and it wasn't large enough, and then there is a second. So maybe
yes.
it's not a single spike that encodes the incoming signal, but
I think these are like input neurons, like on the y-axis up top, the efferent number 0 to 10. So the trace is on the postsynaptic neuron. So the neuron that's receiving these.
Oh, but they're both. They're presynaptic signals, and then there is so what does the neuron do? It fires only if it reaches threshold, or
yes. Yes.
Okay.
Neuron fires.
But then all of those spikes come from the presynaptic.
Yes.
Presynaptic spikes, and then some of them are just add up to be large enough to have this particular
to be a spike. Yes.
Yeah, to create a spike that goes on further. I mean, yes. Or I'm misunderstanding this idea completely, maybe. So I mean, you have a collection of neurons, and they all keep kind of firing or not firing, but the only way they can fire is that this addition, the overall input signal reaches certain threshold.
Yes.
Okay. Well,
this is the idea. And how?
I mean, what's different here, of course, is temporal dynamics. What's very different from what the usual case. So here, it matters when you fire it, not only that you fire.
If you fire, yes.
Right. So kind of there is more information can be encoded in the sequence of how things get fired. Now, whether this is whether it's useful for learning or not, I guess we'll see.
They said that is important and for the learning, because we can do not so many iteration in the simulation to obtain good results. This is the basic.
Well, you're doing a lot of iterations, because now you have a continuous time parameter.
Yes, but
Usually you have
but
discrete ones, here you have a continuous. So you can do a lot more, but things don't change suddenly on per like small time step. But I guess yeah.
okay, and so they created the classification task. Yes, when we have the P plus, their pattern is presented to the neuron, and this neuron should fire. And when we have P minus, the pattern is presented to the neuron, and neuron should not fire. Yes, and this neuron learns patterns by changing its synaptic efficiencies. This was on the previous slide. Oh, I'm sorry. Previous slide. This is this function. This variable.
So yeah, maybe can you like so you change you don't have back propagation here, do you? Or
No.
okay, how do you then decide when to change?
We change it when we have if we have P plus error, the neurons face to fire to respond to the P patterns. That is this case.
Yeah, but how do you know which way to change the weight? Oh no, it is back propagation. I think it is. It looks like a back propagation.
It looks like, but not.
But it's only one step backwards. Maybe that's kind of you only have shallow.
I think it's just one layer.
Yeah, so
it's one layer, and this
right.
is not.
So it's like a back propagation with a single step backwards, and then
we don't have here hidden layers or something like that.
Only there's one layer. There's only one hidden layer. Yeah. Okay.
Maybe one learning layer. Yes.
Makes sense. Okay.
Okay, and okay, here. Here, maybe to make something clear, I take an example of this temporal learning lure from this paper, which was the inspiration to create paper about we are talking today. And here we have two patterns. One pattern is black, and second pattern is gray.
Mm-hmm.
We give it the input, so-called afferent, to the neurons. Here is the resulting postsynaptic voltage for these patterns. We can say this patterns do that. It's here. Here we have threshold. There's only one peak go to the as denoted by spike, and here is the resulting synaptic changes.
Through learning, right? So now you're
through
saying
learning.
Yeah.
Yes. And
there's only one neuron there. Well, why would we only have one weight changing, or it's just some randomly chosen weight that's shown here?
Here is only one neuron that spikes. Yes.
Okay.
But I think that this is that is only the example to understand the basic idea of this learning type. And from the biological point of view, the training algorithm should adjust synaptic weights by regulation the state between the presynaptic and postsynaptic neurons. So they do this in two types of windows. They have long-term potential and long-term depression window. And the first one, long-term potential, was used to increase the synaptic weight of this is the window from which you chose the spikes. Yes. You consider this spikes in the windows, and this windows is constant, yeah, because there are also another type of windows which you can move, but here is in the one type. And long-term depression, which is used to press the way when the insertion results a fail. Yes, and here they just compare this learning window. They choose this type of window, but compare with another temporal learning inspired by biology. And the neuron the activity of the neurons can be described as a probability distribution, and this very complicated equation, in fact, is the two-state Bernoulli process, because when you choose the C levels coding level, you and the values of the variables, you always have a 0 or 1, yes, in this case, binary patterns, yes. And they created artificial patterns. There was this 100 memory patterns, and they contain of 1024 elements, and they assume different coding levels. Here we have the binary patterns. It look like this, the example, and ternary patterns. There's also example. And these patterns are stored in the n-dimensional vector with the discrete values of activity. What is important here in this was that these input variables were encoded by 12 neurons with the Gaussian receptive fields. And now I want to say about just yours, what is it? Because maybe it is not clear. Receptive fields is the medium where some physiological stimuli can evoke this sensory neuronal response. And this can be expressed as difference between two Gaussian functions. Here are the plots. This comes from this paper, and here we can see they took such a patterns here, and they obtained this correctness for the binary patterns and ternary patterns when they choose different types of coding level and use this temporal learning.
How many hidden neurons they use? How many trainable parameters? What's
12.
12 neurons, and how many parameters, like weights, that I used there?
There was no information about this in the paper.
How many input neurons then there are? How many?
I don't know. I only just there was the information that they created this 100 memory patterns, and 50 of this was for the learning, and 50 of this was for the testing. Yes. This unfortunately, this part of learning and numerical examples are just poorly written. Yes, not so many information. And what do they next? They just take this network and this type of learning and try to classify the continuous case. That was the pictures of iris plant. This is the flower, yes. And we have 3 classes of this. The data set contains 150 samples, and each 50 was for each class. Here we have 4 input variables, yes. And I'm sorry. And they just compare this algorithm with other algorithms with which are already existed. First one is the algorithm from MATLAB. That is the backpropagation. Here we have inputs is with hidden layer. Second one was also from MATLAB. It was the Levenberg-Marquardt, if I'm good saying, training algorithm. This spike probe was the first supervised training, and this was the adaptation of the gradient descent-based error backpropagation method from these papers. And this was strange because this is SWAT, is spiking neural network trainings algorithm, but we then don't have any references. And what they obtained, that they can do less than 100 iteration and obtain very good results, better than results with this algorithm.
So sorry, their results are TEM?
Are better, but they have the less than 100 iteration.
Oh, I see. They can do it faster. Yeah.
Faster. Only this one is fastest, but it's not so accuracy like this. And okay, and that, and in the next part of the paper, they learn this learning algorithm was applied to the visual pattern recognition. This pictures composed of n pixels, and there was such a pictures such as algebraic letters and handwritten digits. And here was they have two types of encoding procedure. In the because when we have the two-dimensional two-dimensional pictures, we must convert them to the temporal spike, the representation. Yes, and they do this procedure and the two ways. First was the successive encoding, and we choose these pixels from the picture in the row-wise manner here. And the second one, when we choose these pixels from pictures with the random manner. And it turned out that this random encoding is better than this successive encoding, because when we have the successive encoding, all spikes are firing in the same time. And when we have the second case, they are spread in the all time domains.
So have they tried the convolutional structure, like when, I don't know, and when you have multiple blocks? Because for the image, it seems like it usually.
It looks like that, but it's no. They just take this is the picture, and here is one pixel, second pixel, and they take only the pixels.
Okay.
And here we can see some results that here are the 4 learning neurons. When we see, I don't know, probably one, only the neuron 4 is firing. When the network is the 5, the second neuron is firing, and the 4, and the 8 we can fire only the first neuron. And this was the evidence that these networks can classify the pictures of digits.
Well, so sorry, to see that evidence, you shouldn't just look at one image firing. You want to see correlations, that all images 8 will make that particular neuron fire, and all images with 1 will have that other fire. So I think it's not just a particular image that should fire, but should a collection of images of the same type class fire. I think that's what they did. This is just an illustration of one.
Do you recall saying how many images these patterns were observed? Probably they
patterns. I don't.
No, but there is like some kind of average loss function on the previous slide, so I assume that does exactly.
Okay.
Here, this correctness was for the successive encoding and for random encoding.
Okay, so for the random encoding, it makes perfect predictions.
Yes, and from the successive encoding, when we choose 1 pixels by 1, that is not good. Yes.
Okay, so now Vladimir posted that there is a recent paper where convolutional structures were used for this input neurons, I guess, which makes more sense, but great, thanks.
And here's only the conclusion that in this paper, authors present the architecture of spiking neural networks, which has been applied to the pattern recognition, of the activities of the neurons and also continuous input variables. The rewarding stimuli, the whole system contain encoding, learning, and readouts layer. The temporal learning rules have been adopted, and the encoding scheme was inspired from the respective fields of biological neuron, and each neuron received the partial information from the stimuli. And here we have the information about the accuracy of this data. I thank you for attention. I think that the convolutional networks are probably better, but I want to just to present something which is biological inspired.
Great.
Thank
you, Agnieszka. Questions?
Yeah, I have a quick question. So how do you determine the number of neurons in your architecture? Is it dependent on number of pixels, or where do you get that estimate?
In fact, I was also curious about this, but there was not such kinds of information in the paper.
Oh, okay, thank you.
I don't know.
Now, the question that I have is whether you can take a single spiking neuron and come up with an artificial neuron, usual neuron architecture for it, such that it fires at a different time step depending on what the incoming signals are. So maybe it has to loop back on itself and kind of keep adding up information or doing something more clever. So like, what is the dual equivalent of the spiking neuron for artificial neuron? And if it exists, yeah, then it would say, well, all right, so spiking neurons are nothing new. You just always take a spiking neural network and rewrite it in the language of the artificial neural network. I don't know the answer, but I think that would be my guess.
Yeah, I think that has been done to some extent with complex valued neurons, artificial neurons. And they also have attractor networks where they basically have complex valued theory that they then translate into spiking neurons to basically recreate the same sort of memory dynamics. Yeah.
Now, I also think that complex is not enough, is not needed, because you can kind of imagine that even if you have complex field propagating, you probably can encode it with 2 reals, and then with a slightly more,
I think so. Yeah,
something more complicated. Now, of course, with a complex number, the complication is multivaluedness, because a function of a complex number may be multivalued, and so you have to make a decision of what is the output would be for such activation functions. But again, I think that this would be interesting to kind of draw a connection between spiking networks and artificial standard neural networks. Yeah, good. Other questions?
Yes, I have one.
Go ahead, Stan.
Yes, I was thinking, can we connect it with, for example, dropout layer? So we can get dropout not with stochastic, like shutdown or enable connections, but this leaky integration. And for example, it could be, because here they look like compared this just on one image, just like scanning or like random, like scanning, but we can use that for some kind of batches, like learning in the batches or time series. So we have similar information, like batch of similar person coming in. So we can memorize stuff which fire same neurons like more frequently. So like this kind of connection between.
Yeah, I think there are 2 questions here. Can you implement now? Dropout is of course like a part of the learning dynamics that you would see. So, but the spiking neural network, even without learning, have the temporal dependence. And so when you're saying, let's see what the dropout means in the language of the learning dynamics of the spiking neural networks, then that's a second question, right? So the two things, like if we have to connect to the standard artificial neural networks, is like, is activation dynamics can be reproduced, and then is the different types of the learning dynamics or different algorithms can be reproduced here, and what do they mean? yeah, and that, yeah, it certainly would be interesting to investigate. I don't know how
think
much
that
is done in this.
I think that the interesting in spiking neural networks is that we can choose different type of coding, yes, and not every coding is working, yes. For
Different types of encoding, you mean? Yeah.
yes,
Yeah, well, encoding is just taking information that was written in one way and putting it in temporal dependence. So my guess that temporal dependence can still be implemented with recurrent neural networks, cleverly designed. But I think what Sten is telling now is that, well, I mean, there is something else in the learning dynamics. You can have like dropout connections, and then what would that mean
Yes.
the spike in dynamics? I don't know. I'm just
yes. Yeah, there is some like mean there. For example, if we have this stochastic batches where we have like different information from different classes, we might not get anything useful from these time sequences. But if we're doing some kind of time series when each like next value is connected.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Or like batches connected like semantically. Again, we can, for example, like video stream when we have similar like person just like moving. So from this type of batches, we can like really get, if we get this special integrating dropout, we can like basically integrate this special integrated dropout in more complicated deep learning schemas. And
yeah, so I think what you're saying is that you can have a training data set which has temporal correlations, right?
Yes,
so that
yes,
like,
yes.
And then if that happens, it's a special type of neural network would be needed for that regardless. Presumably something recurrent, so that's not just feed forward. And then in this case, but the temporal dynamics is already hidden within the spike in neural networks, and so maybe that kind of already tells us how such problems should be solved, and then use it.
And we can use
that certainly makes sense. But I still, I mean, my claim is that, and what Vladimir said supports it. This language of spiking networks can be translated in the language of the artificial and regular neural networks, and then the only thing we actually learn from that, we get hints of what kind of architecture should be used in the artificial neural networks construction, and that's valid on itself, because we do know that spiking comes from biology, and biology seems to be biology system seems to be good learners, right?
And
we are
like,
good learners.
And another interesting, like Agnieszka, you mentioned before, we have this, and Vladimir, we have this concept of like threshold and aptitude, like doesn't matter. So maybe in our biology doesn't matter, but we can implement like additional parameters. You also like mentioned it. So we will be simulating maybe more advanced biology, which like theoretically could be implemented.
Good. And I think
taking into account noise in the system, because noise may be beneficial. There are so many papers from the biological.
I think Vladimir said that for this particular temporal encoding, where you only encode when something happens, and only it's large enough amplitude, that's it. But presumably you can encode in the temporal dynamics a lot more. And even if we are the biological systems that don't use that, for us, just important the threshold of when it happens. It's a time dependent function, so there's a lot you can encode in it, presumably, and so and then we may make use of it regardless of what that not being used in biology. But Vladimir will tell more, because he that's what he said.
So I think what you're referring to is graded spikes. So the spike amplitudes are different. They're starting to actually use that on Loihi neuromorphic chip. But the problem with that is you can't have too many gradations, because then you're basically quantizing the real, values. You're trying to quantize that somehow. And then you're kind of losing the energy efficiency of neuromorphic chips, because their energy efficiency comes from precisely just communicating through these very low information content spikes. So as you add gradations, you kind of need to add more like information per spike.
Well, I mean, this is if you insist that everything has to be digital, right? So, but maybe there is an analog information that maybe more noisy, but still is important. So really the amplitude of the spike contains that information, and then it's up to network to decide whether to use it in a discrete fashion, on and off, or in a continuous fashion, like, how high. And there is another also continuous parameter when the spike occurs, right? So there is like, it's a function that has all that. And the question is, to what advantage do we have by doing that? As you said, yes, you will, your chip may not be able to encode all this digital information, encode it in this path, but maybe for learning, the analog information is beneficial more than the digital.
Yeah, definitely. I think, the brain uses both.
Yeah, exactly. So we just,
in many cases, I think
the point was just, let's try and see.
Yeah, definitely. Actually, there's cases where in the brain you have neurons that they fire their spike, but then the synapse actually is like much more massive than your standard synapse, so that it sends a much bigger signal to the downstream neuron. So essentially, that's kind of like converting a spike to like a graded, I guess, version of a spike.
Yep.
So yeah, that's actually
another important point, because many of those things can be just absorbed in the weight, right?
Yeah.
So you're saying like, well, I want amplitudes to have different values, but that is equivalent of saying that I keep the amplitude fixed, but then just will have different values of the weights, like rescale the weights, and then you are not getting anything new, but having this different amplitudes. Anyways, this is something to explore, of course, to see what's the benefit.
And also in the brain, this is dependent on the type of neurons in the real brain, because one type of neuron used only this time of spiking to send the information, and another used also this time, the time, not only the time of the high, but also the times of the appearance precise. There was I read some papers about this.
Yeah, but I think, the main point is, what is the algorithmic advantage of all of them? So that's kind of, if we want to understand what algorithmic advantage of having this temporal spikes or heights of the spikes or frequencies, well, let's quantify.
I think that the authors said that the main advantage is that they have not so many neurons and not so many iteration.
Yeah, but their neurons is complex. See that more complex. That's what I'm saying. Maybe if you just write it in the usual language, you'll just be dealing with some deep neural network which does exactly
yes
what it should do.
That's true.
Yeah. Good. Other questions, comments? Thank you, Agnieszka. And
thank you.
Stop recording.